Join the Institute for National Security Studies and the Cybersecurity Forum Initiative, where top leaders and experts will present new technologies, intelligence, and cybersecurity. Previous speakers have included former intelligence directors from international renowned cybersecurity experts, ministers, international security agencies, and military and top executives from the cybersecurity industry. Be part of the conversation on April 27th and 28th, 2015 at the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center and George Washington University in Washington, D.C. Join us for an innovative 2 days of speakers, workshops, and exhibitions where all sectors can join the discussion on defensive cyberspace operations and intelligence.
I suggest we get started so that those who aren't here will enter at their convenience. Thank you and welcome to the brave who have remained. We're going to hold a discussion today on the subject of Israel and what it needs to do in order to maintain its cyber edge. Or are we indeed a cyber nation, as the title says? I have 3 speakers here with us. On my left is Orna Berry. Orna Berry is a high-tech entrepreneur in the high-tech sector in Israel. She has been an industrialist and entrepreneur for many years and always was the chief scientist of what is today called the Ministry of the Economy. Later she went to work for EMC and headed the company's R&D department, and she is responsible for the excellence centers in North and South America. Thank you, Orna, for coming to us. On my right is Connie Peterson. Connie is the head of the MA program in cyber in George Washington University and cyber studies. In her role as a head, she has held many exercises on cyber in the United States and in Spain. On my left is Rami Efrati. Rami is the founder of Firmitas, which develops cyber solutions against cyber attacks. Rami is a serial entrepreneur. He's working on his 3rd startup, and he worked in the Prime Minister's office and was in charge of civil defense in the area of cyber. And he, in his role, turned Israel into a cyber center. Rami is a colonel and he in the reserves, and he has received many prizes, and he still does his reserves duty, so we will relate with great respect. So let's hear a round of applause. That's always good energy. The subject that we wanted to talk about here is, it relates to the question that are we doing enough in the area of development, technological development, and human development, or have we just created a kind of a pose in the past few years, and are we just going through the motions, as it were? Is there really any real content to the development of the cyber area in Israel? There are a lot of startups in the area of cyber in Israel, but we don't see sales of products in the area of cyber. I know there are companies that sell products, but not at the scope of the noise that we make. And the question that I want to ask here relates to this anomaly. I don't know if the members of the panel feel the same as me. I know we've taken the area of cyber, and Rami will talk about it, and we've turned a threat into a business opportunity, and there is a business opportunity here. But there is a wide range of subjects that I feel when I visit other countries and when I talk to other people that there are places where they relate to this matter, not because they're better than us, but because they feel they need to keep up. They act a little bit more systematically and orderly in this area. And we, because we're so sure that we're so great in the area of cyber and that we have a very strong area, we're very strong in cyber, we may be neglecting some things. There are some subjects I'd like to raise as a teaser for this subject. The first relates to the development of our human capital. We see that expertise in the area of cyber comes from the defense system, which gives the civilian market dozens of experts after they've completed their Army service, who were trained by the Army or who studied in the context of their studies. They come into the labor market, and they feel that academic studies is not the thing that's most important for them. They're moving more in the direction of development, and they move on, and we see there are a lot of startups, companies, and quite a few companies that are led by people of this kind. And the question is, can you base long-term development on this type of human capital? There's a lot of money for startup companies and cyber companies in Israel, but I have trouble seeing the matching between the raising of money and the actual developments, where people might be making money, but I don't see how this makes it possible for us to turn these developments into something more stable and more viable. And I think that this is something worth looking into. Another subject relates to the interface between the civilian world and the security world, the subject of supervision of manufacturing. I discussed this with Orna, the development of supervision over exports. For example, defense products in the area of cyber. Is that something that needs to be supervised and overseen by the Ministry of Defense? Is this a security product? In other words, it could defense products in cyber usually have a dual use, both military you can see how we want to see how the State of Israel is dealing with these issues, and we'll ask the members of the panel to talk about this area, and then we'll open the floor up to questions, and we'd be happy to hear your questions. Perhaps we'll start with Orna, if you like. I'll start. I will try to create two models in my head. The first model is a model of education, not necessarily formal education, but it's a type of education that people in intelligence units receive, even if they don't come as part of the academic reserve, and this enables them to work. And I'll talk about another subject, and the full house, the cup half full in our case, it creates an emotional dynamic of survivability and of deterrence, and this has a very strong impact on the industry. In, for example, people who have studied and they're better able to create groups in which there is innovation and the ability to actually perform and carry out the ideas. This is a model that we need to maintain in our minds, but on the other hand, there is a state and there is a high level of internal consumption relative to the size of the country of products in the area of cyber and security. There is manpower, certainly in the area of cyber, and they're starting to train this in the area in the academy. And there's another area that is called data information and predictive analytics. And these two areas are areas that separate the wheat from the chaff, and they are able to identify the weak points and to create defense because they know what happens in the attack. So I've already said that there is manpower and there's a state, and there is a very big customer that's called the defense establishment and all that that implies. And there are companies that are active in the field, and sometimes they cooperate. And today when we're talking about regulation and certs, they're more cooperative. And there is, of course, a very competitive environment, both internally within the various units in the security establishment, as well as in the civilian industries. And you have all the big industries involved. So there are very important contexts between all of these components in the creation of what is called a critical mass in a specific industry. It could be small industries that want to be distinct, and they could be big industries because solutions don't come from a single technology. And when you're talking about computerizing systems and cloud architecture, you're talking about communications and about data that need to be protected, then certainly there is not a single technology or a single type of analyst that uses a specific tool can defend all these things together. And so clearly, we, relative to our size and because of our relative position, we have a considerable power. Most of the investments in technology are not internal. This is not Mafat, and this is not the chief scientist, and it's not the local industries. These are external investments. If we prevent the export of technologies in the area of data security and cyber attacks, we will find ourselves diluting these investments and not enabling the investment in excellence. And we shouldn't be surprised to see some of these people leaving and doing these things in other places in the world. So from my perspective, there is no doubt that this is an area of first priority for our existence and for our ability to compete. And I'm sure that there is an investment on part of the academic system and all those people in the military that deal in these areas, and therefore we must not create restrictions, and we have to think about it. If we don't invent it, somebody else will, somewhere else. And most of the solutions are not solutions of a single technology or a single product. They are integrated solutions. And that's why the idea of going back to a place when there were restrictions between the U.S. and the United States, and when there was something called the Code Law, where the United States wanted to enable Israel only to sell inferior encoding products, deciphering products, We must not go back to that place. We are simply restricting we're simply limiting our economic growth.
Connie, I want to ask you about, you heard this discussion about business, government, and business. So it's different in the U.S. However, do you have any model for business cooperation with the university? Do you have anything like incubator in the university, incubating new ideas of students, new ideas of entrepreneurs in
the college that I'm associated with is the College of Professional Studies, and that's the entrepreneurial arm of the college. And so we do encourage, especially with the Cyber Training Academy, we have been dealing and working with smaller businesses to try to drive innovation and also to create opportunities for smaller businesses to be able to create training and bring something to the table, and also to be able to work with larger corporations. We had a bank that came to us that was looking for a specific type of training, so we want to be able to work with smaller companies and larger companies to see what can you do to be able to help us to create hybrid training. So that's one thing that we do. I did have a question, since it is a little different in the United States. Do you have a small business administration that helps and works with? Yeah, because it is very challenging. When you have people with creative minds and a lot of innovation, how can they drive that to market, and how can they sustain their business if they're not business-minded? And can they get the support they need to do that? But yeah, at George Washington University, we are really encouraging innovation, and we do reach out to the private sector, both large and smaller companies, to be able to work with us, and especially in the field of cyber. It's such a growing field, and we really need to be able to collaborate. There's so much going on. And as we move into the future, we need to be able to move it rapidly and with people with all sorts of answers. The answer is not just going to come from one area.
Okay, thank you. Orna, רצית איזה מילה להכניס שמה?
Just about the probability to succeed and the knowledge. Knowledge is one of those special cases that you create knowledge and you use knowledge, the knowledge gets better. So one of the reasons why you see investments in knowledge, even in high-risk situations that are less likely to succeed commercially, is that the knowledge remains even if the business fails. And it goes further and evolves.
Rami. I'm now a private entrepreneur in cyber. I'm not from the Prime Minister's office any longer, so you can assume that I'm now telling you the entire truth. I think that one of the most amazing things that happened following the Prime Minister's decision, the government's decision, is the establishment of the National Cyber Headquarters that realized that the issue of threat in cyber attacks is meaningful not only for Israel but for the worldwide. I like to mention figures. So the Alexander Haig, the commander of cyber defense in the United States, said that IP theft on a yearly basis is at $250 billion annually. And looking at the scope of cyber crime, we're talking about $400 billion a year. This was presented to the Israeli government through Dr. Matania, Israeli head of cyber department. I'm not talking about bombing power plants. I'm talking about things that affect us directly. I just talked about the financial sector right now. And so in Israel, there was a view that really was a precedent in the world. We said, if we have such good people, such a great ecosystem which is unique to Israel, let's see how we turn this threat to a business opportunity. And in order to make it a business opportunity, let's see how the government invests. And by the way, I just read yesterday that the government is investing 250 million, about $250 million shekels for 5 years' time to develop the cyber This is not only industry, it's industry, academy, national infrastructure, education, etc. All of this construct together a cyber solution. And I have to correct something here, Gabi. I have a bit of a dispute here. And the state of Israel exported in 2013 regarding cyber. We're talking about $3 billion. This is a scope. Any comments? This is because any IP solution is referred to as cyber, and the international market is 60 billion. So 5% came from Israel only. I'm not talking about acquisitions of startup companies where this is 700 million by the international industry, international companies who bought Israeli startup companies. And I'm sharing this with you because, first of all, this is an amazing export industry. And to this industry, we have the partnership of almost all government ministries. Cyber headquarters was the leader. This was joined by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs with all its amazing activity regarding the development of the issue of foreign relations regarding cyber. And of course, the leader is the United States. This was also joined by the Ministry of Education, who's training people, Ministry of Security, of Defense with its particular needs, Ministry of Technology and Space, and the Chief Scientist and Ministry of Industry. They all provided particular tools in order to develop the cyber industry. We can now say very proudly so that we have in Israel, and this is an IVC figure, we have 301 cyber companies in Israel, because the solution for cyber is not where one company would provide it all. The directions that were hinted by Gabi, a large integrating company that does it all. This is an interesting direction, but you cannot do it without those small cyber or middle-sized companies along the way. And so this is bringing something else that is going to help Israeli economy. This brought about the international R&D centers of international societies who came, international companies who came to Israel, Lockheed Martin, IBM, Cisco, and many others. They built here in Israel international centers of cyber. What is good about that? It brings in money, investment. It makes the good people, Israeli people, to stay here in the country. I am all for R&D centers to be in Israel, but marketing and sales outside of Israel, because this is where sales are. All of these centers created a cyber industry that affects the world. The fact that there are international R&D centers and the academy I'm going to talk about in a minute brings many international entities to understand that it has to be done in Israel. The solution is not Israel, but it is a shared solution by all of us. But as the more the Israeli component is going to be larger in cyber solutions, we're going to bring in much more money to the country. This is a known fact, and we are well known as a cyber power, not because of the quantity, because we're a small country, but rather because of quality and human technology that we bring in the box or outside the box. Cyber industry is not only high-tech companies, it is the entire ecosystem surrounding it. For example, if today there is an international CERT in Israel, it will incorporate many Israeli companies. It is the Computer Emergency Response Team that is now being built by the headquarters. If we understand that we have excellent people, we have to understand we don't have enough. We need academy. We need R&D centers that will research cyber. We need people to learn cyber as a degree, an academic degree. And the one to start with it was the Ben Gurion University in the Negev, that has its own master's degree, cyber master's degree. The more people we bring into the industry, and we have good people, the more we'll be able to develop here a cyber industry that is larger. One more word regarding export license. I'm very clear in the subject, and I'm talking about the industry of protecting cyber. I'm not going into cyber attack. I think this has to be supervised. Cyber defense, the moment it turns into something that is regulated and monitored in Israel, we're going to have real harm, and we're not going to see any investment of international companies. So it has to be done wisely. The first thing to do is the fact that we don't have to invent the wheel. If the greatest power in the world, the United States, is still not supervising the security export of protecting cyber, we do not have to be the first ones to say do not invest here. So let's see what America is doing with all modesty. Very well. I would like to say that Rami is my brother. You're good brothers.
I have a question, Orna. You said 300 and something companies. I think statistics are proving that most of them, sadly, will fail. The vast majority. The question, what is the optimal investment model? To invest in the big companies? The big companies, when they come to Beersheba, they also enjoy state funds. Orna knows it better than I do. Is the model to go in the direction of the big companies or the small companies? The question is, what is the balance between the things? Because I'm part of a big company, I won't take my perspective. I will take the perspective of the industrial park in Beersheba. And this is the story. For 17 years, they dreamed of building an industrial park in Beersheba. And then I came myself, and I gave a commitment to rent a floor in the first building, and then the company Gaviam Negev could go to the banks and get money and build the building. 17 years later, there's a building there near the train station opposite the university. There's a bridge between the railway station and the university, not yet the park. But if you ask Uzi Swebner, who is the entrepreneur of the industrial park in Beersheba, he will tell you that his biggest nightmare is when they try to encourage only small companies, because the incentivization for the small companies they try to keep people in Beersheba rather than Herzliya. And because of the investment in the ecosystem, I am also a contributor to the establishment of a non-profit entity, which I think the state should have established, what is called Cyprus Park. And its aim is to give information to any international company that wants to come, to every elementary school that wants to come and study. So my great honor as the entrepreneur of 4 small companies which were successful, the honor that I have, the respect that I have for small companies is enormous. I love people who dare, but ultimately the critical mass is very, very important. When I was the first time an entrepreneur, I left a company because I didn't listen to what I wanted to do. And I did what I wanted to do somewhere else. And indeed, that company was bought. And I think that it is arrogant on the part of people to think that one kind of thing in isolation can create an entire relevant thing. Just like we don't want workers of one kind, we want a big variety of people. So the success of international companies is the best testimony, the best way of getting investors to invest more in Israel. I'd like to ask you, Rami, about the difficulty of small companies to break through. As I said, the small companies, there are a lot of them, and their problem ultimately to turn it into a product, to do the whole business cycle. It's not just the idea, there's some fantastic out there, but to complete the entire business cycle and to see a living business model with a real product. What do you think about that? I think that cycle is a positive thing, and the fact is I've opened a new company, a small company in the area of cyber. I hope it won't be part of the bad statistics. I do too. If we look at the history of the State of Israel, we'll see that in the State of Israel there isn't a single company that deals with one of antiviruses, which was once very relevant to cyber. There is one very successful company that deals with firewalls, Checkpoint, and it is the pride of Israel. Checkpoint could be built not because other companies failed, but because the state invested a lot of money in small companies in the understanding that if we put a lot of money into cyber and 2 or 3 more checkpoints arise, the benefit is clear. What is the problem with the small companies? The problem is, first of all, the vision. What do we want to be when we grow up? Some of them say right away we want an IPO, and some say we want to be sold. That's the style. There are some young companies in Israel, 2 or 3 years old, that were sold for a few $100 million each. We're very proud of that, and it's very good. There are some who want to be a big company in Israel. That's what I want. But we need to understand one thing. The problem of all these young people who are starting these companies, these are very gifted people, very serious people. They grew up in these special units where they were taught to think outside the box. That fact is the problem is they need a responsible adult to look at their business program and open the door here. A smart VC that invests in an Israeli startup is a VC that brings an added value to the company. What added value? It knows how to bring it to the big companies. Not everybody knows how to get to become EMC or GE. It takes years. Some of those companies will fail, and if there are those who know how to lead them, I believe they will have a good chance of success. There's only one problem today, and it too will be resolved with the help of the Foreign Ministry and the Ministry of the Economy and the Cyber Headquarters, and that's the fact that many international companies, especially governmental departments, they are afraid to invest. They're because they look at us as like a backdoor application, like China, and when we have to look at all those things, and they need to understand that we are doing business with good products, and that will enable us to enter the market, because not only does the market want us, it needs us. Why? Because the Israeli industry, out of the 300 companies, there are at least 100 that have brought solutions to future cyber threats, advanced persistent threats, APT. McAfee is today declaring that the age of the antivirus is over, and because there are over 150,000 mutations of malware.
Connie, I want to ask you about, you heard this discussion about business, government, and business. So it's different in the U.S. However, do you have any model for business cooperation with the university? Do you have anything like incubator in the university, incubating new ideas of students, new ideas of entrepreneurs
The college that I'm associated with is the College of Professional Studies, and that's the entrepreneurial arm of the college. And so we do encourage, especially with the Cyber Training Academy, we have been dealing and working with smaller businesses to try to drive innovation and also to create opportunities for smaller businesses to be able to create training and bring something to the table, and also to be able to work with larger corporations. We had a bank that came to us that was looking for a specific type of training, so we want to be able to work with smaller companies and larger companies to see what can you do to be able to help us to create hybrid training. So that's one thing that we do. I did have a question, since it is a little different in the United States. Do you have a small business administration that helps and works with? Yeah, because it is very challenging. When you have people with creative minds and a lot of innovation, how can they drive that to market, and how can they sustain their business if they're not business-minded? And can they get the support they need to do that? But yeah, at George Washington University, we are really encouraging innovation, and we do reach out to the private sector, both large and smaller companies. to be able to work with us, and especially in the field of cyber. It's such a growing field, and we really need to be able to collaborate. There's so much going on, and as we move into the future, we need to be able to move it rapidly and with people with all sorts of answers. The answer is not just going to come from one area.
Okay, thank you. Orna, רצית איזה מילה להכניס שמה?
Just about the probability to succeed and the knowledge. Knowledge is one of those special cases that you create knowledge and you use knowledge, the knowledge gets better. So one of the reasons why you see investments in knowledge, even in high-risk situations that are less likely to succeed commercially, is that the knowledge remains even if the business fails, and it goes further and evolves.
Thank you. I would like to thank the members of the panel. I agree with everything Orna said, that even companies that fail have an important role in the development of knowledge. We don't want anyone to fail, of course. Those are people's hopes hanging in the balance and their savings, and but that's the statistics. I'd like to thank everyone for listening and for being here, and thank you to the panelists. Thank you very much.